Podcast stats are the currency to your show's success, but some are more useful than others. In this video, I'm going to show you which ones matter.
Here we go!
I understand that there's a lot of things to do when you're creating a podcast, but checking your podcast stats should be on your to-do list. It helps you understand your audience and what they like and don't so that you can create more relevant content for them. Let's say you have a podcast about cooking and you had a few episodes on grilling and it didn't do that well. That's probably a sign you should go into another direction and maybe create episodes on things like baking. Another reason why podcast stats are so important is it can help you gauge things like growth for your show. So if you check your stats regularly, you can experiment with different tactics like marketing techniques to see whether what you're trying is helping you reach a wider audience. Let's switch gears and talk about monetization for a second. Understanding your podcast stats is important to measure the potential to monetize your show. And that's for one of two reasons. The first reason is that sponsors like to look at your stats in order to negotiate rates and fees with you if you decide to partner up with them. The second reason is that traditional ad networks use a stat called CPM, which means cost per thousand listens. And this is important because it can give you a benchmark to see the potential in how much your show can earn. Now that you know why podcast stats are important, let's go into the ones that really matter. The number of downloads is one of the most useful stats for any podcaster, and that's because understanding the number of downloads gives you an insight into how your audience is interacting with your show. So for example, if you're trying to figure out what types of topics you want to do next for your show, take a look at the number of downloads in each episode. The ones that have more downloads might be an indicator that your audience really likes those topics or the guests that you brought on for that particular show. You know what? I'm going to give you a real-world example and invite Jalan on to talk about her podcast. Jalan, how do you measure your downloads?
So I usually have a baseline for how my episodes perform within the first 7 days and then the first 30 days. So when I put out a new episode, if it's doing better than that typical trajectory, I know, wow, my audience is really enjoying this. This is something that people may want to hear more about. So I'll put that in my back pocket for later as I'm planning future episodes.
Thanks, Jalan.
Of course.
Jalan talked about the highest performing episodes, but equally as important is the lowest performing episodes for your show. That's because if your audience isn't resonating with any of these topics, then you know to avoid them for the future. The next stat that matters in podcasting is average consumption. And what that means is how long someone is listening to your show before they stop. You can learn a lot about where your audience drops off. Let's say your show is 60 minutes long and most of your audience drops off around the 35-minute mark. That could be an indicator that you need to shorten the length of your episodes. Or if most of your audience drops off before an ad slot, it could be an indicator that you need to move the ad up a little bit to ensure that more people listen to it. If you want to check out average consumption for your podcast, some podcast directories offer this, like Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts. Understanding your audience demographics might be helpful if you're looking for sponsors for your podcast. Audience demographics can be a strong point of negotiation with sponsors. I know I may have spewed out a lot of things about podcast stats, but the most important thing that you need to know is how to use these stats in your podcasting journey. The goal is to better your show, and statistics are merely a way to help you do it. If one of your goals is getting sponsorships, check out this video for a complete guide to podcast sponsorships. Thanks for watching, and as always, keep podcasting.